Hey everybody, this is Theoretical BS, blah blah blah, witty commentary, blah blah blah, update on my life, blah blah blah, you know the drill. Okay, so this is another response to Z Cooker 88 on the matter of my Lord Logic video. Zach, your video sucked. I'm annoyed because this is one of the most intellectually sloppy videos I've seen from you. And I like you, so I feel bad saying that, but man, you're all over the place. I mean, nowhere in your video was a coherent defensive tag and its premises. The whole thing was you just arbitrarily quoting me out of context, profoundly misrepresenting my position, and that's half the time. The other half the time you were going off on tangents that had nothing to do with tag or my rebuttal to it. All I can really do is go down the line correcting you, I hate using that word, about stupid things that shouldn't even be an issue, but that barricade us from having a productive discourse. Things like you not understanding my argument, you misquoting me, taking me out of context, you misrepresenting my position, you asking me unnecessary questions that would have been answered very clearly just by having paid more attention to my video. It's as if, it's really like you had my video on in the background while you were playing Halo 3 and you just happened to respond to whatever bits and pieces you picked up. Okay, so you said a few things in the beginning describing the tag argument. I just want to go over those really quick. You said logic exists and it's absolute. It doesn't cease to exist when you cease to exist. Yes, it does. Human beings created the language of logic. All the symbols, all the formulas, statements, rules, that's man-made. That does go away if consciousness goes away. But logic is just a representation of something else, of the behavior of existence. That doesn't go away if consciousness does, but that's not what logic is. That's what logic addresses. So already you're off to a bad start. Yeah, logic goes away if consciousness goes away. And then you said logic is a reflection of a mind, and the mind is God. No, again, you've got that backwards. Logic isn't a reflection of a mind, it's a reflection by a mind of something else. Logic is when a mind reflects on existence, when a mind reflects on the way that existence behaves. Now, I may seem like I'm nitpicking here, but it's really important that we're clear on our terminology. You can't just use a word twice in the same argument, having it mean one thing one time and then another thing another time. That's called a fallacy of equivocation, and you make that fallacy several times throughout this video. There's two different things, and we need two different terms for them. One is the language of logic that we created in order to talk about existence, and the other is existence itself and the way in which it behaves. The picture of the tree is not the tree, and the tree is not the picture. In the Lord Logic video, I asked you the following questions. Why does God exist instead of not existing? Why does God have the qualities he has instead of other qualities? And why is God's will effective instead of ineffective or partially effective? Here's how you responded to that. Hold up. Why are you asking why God exists before we've established whether God actually exists? Well, Zach, for the same reason you asked me to account for logical absolutes in an atheistic worldview before us establishing an atheistic worldview. You know that. It's a very common, very effective method of argumentation to assume the truth of your opponent's worldview and then deconstruct it from the inside out by taking it to its logical conclusions. In fact, that's exactly what many versions of the tag argument attempt to do. But I shouldn't have to tell you this. If you watched my video, you'd know exactly why I asked you those questions and why your answer to those questions makes the entire tag argument work against you instead of for you. I spend almost my entire video illustrating that point, and I didn't hear one thing from you in your video addressing it. So then you say that God exists because there is no other option. He just always existed. Do you really think that's an answer to my question? I didn't ask you when God began to exist or what caused God to exist. I made it very clear that I know you believe God is eternal. Again, if you paid attention to my video, you'd know that. What I asked was, in light of that, why does God exist instead of not existing at all? You still haven't answered that question. And in any case, the question is rhetorical, because you can't account for God's existence. Your beliefs about God force you to conclude that God just is, and by doing so, Zach, you acknowledge that it's possible for there to be certain aspects of existence that don't need to be accounted for, thus invalidating your demand for me to account for the behavior of existence, which you incorrectly call logic, by the way. I said in my video that you maintain God just is, and just is the way he is for no reason with no cause. What I'm saying by that is that you believe God never began to exist, which means that God was not caused by anything, and thus no reasoning went into God having one quality instead of another. No reason, no cause. In response to that, you said, how would you know it's for no cause? Us Christians know it's for his glorification. Are you kidding me? Do you realize that makes no sense at all as a response to what I said? Are you trying to tell me that glorification of God caused God to exist? Because that's what I was talking about. something causing God to exist, not God having cause for doing something. You took the word cause, you stripped it from its context in my argument, you gave it a completely different definition, and then responded to the definition you chose for it, all the while ignoring my point. You do this again and again in your video, Zach, and it's so frustrating because it could have been easily prevented if you had just made an effort to comprehend my point before responding to it. When you quote the part of my video where I asked you to account for why God's will is effective, you said, because he's God. That's not an answer. I mean, did you really think that I would let you get away with that? Like that would stump me? So you're saying he's God because he has an effective will, and he has an effective will because he's God. That's circular reasoning. That's a fallacy. It's like you're not even trying. And then you go on for another minute and a half in your video talking about stick'em chat rooms, infinite regressions, evolution, all of which are red herrings, none of which having anything to do whatsoever with tag or my refutation of tag. So I'm just going to skip all that. And then later, in response to my statement that you believe God is preceded by nothing, you said, no, that's evolution, which is yet another red herring, by the way. And I didn't say preceded by nothingness. I said preceded by nothing, as in not preceded by anything, which is exactly what infinitely means. I was accurately describing your position, not making a straw man, as you claimed. However, only a second later, you make a straw man yourself when you say that I claim God's actions are random. No, I don't. I never said anything about God's actions. Watch the video again if you want. I don't know where you got that from. What would be random are God's qualities and nature and attributes, since there can be no account, cause, or purpose for why they are what they are instead of something else. And I went into some detail illustrating why that is in my video, you just haven't addressed it. The words I use are important because they mean something specific. You don't get to conveniently substitute another word with another meaning into my argument and then respond to that and expect me to take you seriously. You go on in your video to make another red herring comment about evolution, which was a straw man in itself, by the way, and then you finally say that in my video I didn't address the issue and try to confuse you by creating another argument meant to distract us from the point. No, I didn't. I kept the focus exactly where it needed to be, and I addressed the three main premises upon which your argument was predicated. I gave an account for what logic is and how it works without appealing to a creator or absolute consciousness. I gave a rebuttal to your claim that a worldview has to be able to account for logical absolutes in order to be valid, and I demonstrated that your worldview does not account for logical absolutes itself and therefore isn't any more credible than mine. You are the one who has not defended any of these premises anywhere in your video. Why not? So you start to wrap up your video by saying that you can account for God's existence because God just is and always has been, and that's how you account for it. And you say this so confidently, and yet it seems to escape you that by doing so, you've forfeited your own argument. If saying that something just is should be considered a valid means of accounting for it, then you just paved the way for any opponent to account for the consistency of existence, which you call logic, by doing just that. It just is. And if you have a problem with that account for laws of logic, then you better get to work on finding a better account for God. Zach, you gave yourself 4 months to respond to my Lord Logic video, and this is what you came up with. So either you're not trying at all, or you had a strategy. But if you had a strategy, this was your strategy. Misquote me and put words into my mouth that I didn't say and then respond to them instead of what I actually said. Take words or phrases that I use in my argument and then substitute in a different definition, thereby completely changing the meaning of my argument and your response. Tap dance around the issue by invoking subjects and stories that have nothing to do with the topic at hand and go off on long-winded tangents about them. Ignore and skip over parts of my video that demonstrate in detail why I come to the conclusions I do in favor of tiny little sound bites removed from their context and meaning. And finally, make statements like, because he's God, it just is that way, and there is no other option, without qualifying or substantiating those statements in any way. What I would love from you is if you didn't even respond to this video. There's nothing new here. There's no argument being made. In fact, I would love to just be able to delete this video in the future. And instead, just go back and start all over on a new response to Lord Logic. And this time, just make sure that you quote me correctly, make sure you're clear on the definitions and the meanings of the words that I'm using. For God's sake, stay on topic. And finally, give me the respect and the courtesy of comprehending my argument as a whole before responding to it. Get clear on what my premises are and how my conclusion follows from them. Even if you don't agree, just make sure you understand my reasoning. And if you have to email me 3 times a day to clarify something, fine. I'm totally cool with that. I would do the same for you. Okay, that's all. I'm sorry for coming down on you so hard. I hope to hear from you soon.